Alright, my name is Ryan Dickerson and I'm a student in the Brady class of 2025, and this is our Scrubs video for the foot. As always, going through our mission statement, Scrubs is a student-driven initiative that aims to develop supplemental resources for current and future cohorts that will pass through Brady, and members of Scrubs participate in a variety of subcommittees working to create resources for students by students with the aim of offering you a perspective of a student who's gone through these courses that you're going through now. So the hope is that this organization will be a staple of student Brady, and if this is something that aligns with your goals, we're always looking for new members. Brief disclaimer, this resource and any other resources made by Scrubs are student-made documents, and as such there is a possibility for errors, although we do attempt to minimize these as much as possible. If there is ever a contradiction in the coursework being presented within your course and our resources, please go by your course documents. Additionally, Scrubs aims to be a supplemental resource and is not replacing the instruction of the Brady faculty, so please utilize your course documents as your primary resources and these resources as secondary resources. With that, let's go ahead and get into the material, starting with osteology. So we're going to start with the osteology of the foot. The big thing here is that we need to make sure we remember our tarsal bones. Our tarsal bones are made up of the talus, calcaneus, navicular, cuboid, and then our cuneiforms, the medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiforms. One way to remember this is the mnemonic: tiger cubs need milk. So talus, calcaneus, navicular, and cuboid, and then medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiforms. So let's look at where these are actually located on the osteology of the foot. The first is your talus. Your talus is the weight-bearing bone that is articulating with the tibia, and it's going to be located a little bit medially. And just for orientation, this is a top-down view of the foot, or a dorsal view, whereas this is a plantar view, looking from the bottom of the foot up. So talus located here, and then directly underneath the talus is your calcaneus. This is the one of the largest bones in your heel, if not the largest bone, and this is what if you reach down and feel your heel, this is what you're feeling here. This is where the Achilles tendon inserts. So here's your calcaneus. Here it is from an inferior view. Now directly in front of the talus is this bone. This is going to be your navicular. So the navicular is sitting right in front of the talus, and on inferior view you can see it here. So you have, one more time, the talus, calcaneus underneath, and then in front of that the navicular. And if you come over here laterally, I kind of think within this same row, this is where we're going to get the cuboid. And apparently someone thought that it looked like a cube, so this is where it gets its name. Cuboid right here, number 7. And then lastly, kind of this distal row, you have your cuneiforms. You have your medial cuneiform, because remember, big toe represents the medial aspect of the foot, the intermediate cuneiform, and then the lateral cuneiform. So again, rapid fire: talus, calcaneus, navicular, cuboid, and then medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiforms. Just like in the hand, you're then going to go into metatarsals, then phalanx, and then distal phalanx. And that's with a big toe. You'll have a middle phalanx in the other digits of the toe. And that is a quick overview of the osteology that we need to keep up with when you're reading through the course pack. So starting off with the muscles of the foot, we're going to start with the dorsum of the foot because it only has 2 muscles, and it makes it really easy for us. Both of these muscles are going to be innervated by a continuation of the deep fibular nerve. Remember, the deep fibular nerve was innervating all the muscles in the anterior compartment of the leg? So now this is just a continuation of the deep fibular nerve as it runs into the dorsum of the foot, along with the anterior tibial artery. So here's the extensor digitorum brevis. The extensor digitorum brevis is located right here in red. It is going to originate from the calcaneus, which again was at the heel bone, and it is going to insert into the tendons of the extensor digitorum longus, digits 2 through 4. So inserting into the tendons of the extensor digitorum longus, helping aid in their function. Innervation is via the deep fibular nerve, which we've mentioned, L4 through S2, and it's going to extend digits 2 through 4. You do have one component, or another muscle located just medial to this. This is the extensor hallucis brevis. The extensor hallucis brevis is going to originate from the tendons of the extensor digitorum brevis, and then it's going to come it's going to come medially into the proximal phalanx of the big toe, and it's going to extend the big toe. Again, once again, innervated by the deep fibular nerve as it's running down through the anterior compartment of the leg into the dorsal aspect of the foot. So these are two muscles of the dorsum of the foot. Alright, and now getting into the muscles of the plantar foot. When we're thinking about the aspects of the plantar foot, we're going to divide this into 4 layers. There's going to be a superficial layer, and then we're going to work our way deep. So we're going to start off with the most superficial layer here. This layer consists of your abductors and your flexor digitorum brevis, and most of the muscles here are going to be innervated by the medial plantar nerve. And they're all originating from the calcaneus and the plantar aponeurosis back here in the posterior aspect of the plantar foot. So let's see, over here on the big toe side, you have your abductor hallucis for big toe. Over here on the lateral side, you have your abductor digiti minimi. And then right in the middle, you have your flexor digitorum brevis. So it's an abductor sandwich with the flexor digitorum brevis in the middle. So your abductor hallucis is going to arise from the calcaneus and plantar aponeurosis. It is going to insert into the proximal phalanx of the big toe. This muscle is innervated by the medial plantar nerve, which is a continuation in a branch of your your tibial nerve, which went behind the medial malleolus. The action here is going to be to abduct and flex the big toe. Right, you can get that from the name, abductor hallucis. Next, we have our flexor digitorum brevis. This is also innervated by the medial plantar nerve. Great, they're side by side. The flexor digitorum brevis is again originating from the calcaneus and plantar aponeurosis. It is inserting into the middle phalanx of digits 2 through 5. It is going to flex at the proximal interphalangeal joints. Lastly, we have our abductor digiti minimi. It is located most laterally, and as such, it is innervated by the lateral plantar nerve. Again, this is one of your terminal branches of your tibial nerve. It is going to insert into the proximal phalanx of the small toe, and its job is to abduct and flex this toe. So, medial plantar nerve in the superficial compartment doing the majority of the innervation to musculature, that being the flexor digitorum brevis and abductor hallucis, whereas the lateral plantar nerve, which you will see is going to innervate the majority of the muscles of the foot, is only innervating the abductor digiti minimi up here in the superficial compartment. Going into our next layer within the foot, we have now removed the superficial layer and we're looking deep. So in this layer, you have your long tendons and the two muscle groups that are associated. And now we're thinking about innervation primarily by the lateral plantar nerve from here on out. There will only be an exception in each one of these layers, that will be medial plantar nerve. The majority muscle is going to be lateral plantar nerve from here on out. The first muscle we're going to talk about is the quadratus plantae. It's this muscle indicated in blue here. It's arising from either side of your calcaneus and inserting into the lateral margin of your flexor digitorum longus. Remember, your flexor digitorum longus is coming from the deep compartment in the posterior leg, and the tendon runs behind the medial malleolus, and it's coming across the foot to get into the digits of 2 through 5. So this tendon coming across. The quadratus plantae is going to assist the flexor digitorum longus in its action. So it's going to help to pull on this tendon to cause flexion of these digits. So again, assisting the flexion of the flexor digitorum longus. And this muscle is innervated by the lateral plantar nerve, as the majority of the muscles in this layer are going to be. So that is your quadratus plantae. Next, you see these muscles coming off of the tendons of the flexor digitorum longus. So these muscles coming off of the tendons of the flexor digitorum longus are known as the lumbricals. These are the same as the lumbricals in the hand. Remember that the lumbricals in the hand were also coming off the flexor digitorum. In that case, it was the flexor digitorum profundus, or maybe superficial. I'd have to go back and look. But here we have the lumbricals coming off the flexor digitorum longus, and they are going to come off to supply the muscle. The muscles are going to go and insert onto digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. The lateral plantar nerve is going to innervate all of these lumbricals except for the first one. So the first lumbrical innervated by the medial plantar nerve. Okay, so everything in this layer was innervated by the lateral plantar nerve except for the first lumbrical. Spinal segments L4 through S3 for all of these because it's a continuation of the tibial nerve. And the action of your lumbricals is to flex at the metacarpal phalangeal joint and to extend the medial interphalangeal and distal interphalangeal joints. Now we're going to go on to the third layer. So now that we're in the third layer, we've again removed all the muscles in the more superficial layers, and we're looking deep. Here we're going to have our flexors plus our adductor. So just like before when we had a abductor sandwich, we are going to have a flexor sandwich. Here we have a flexor hallucis brevis on the medial aspect, and we have a flexor digiti minimi on the lateral aspect. And right in between, we have our adductor hallucis, which has two heads. It has an oblique head coming across and a transverse head. This is just like the adductor pollicis in the hand. So we have an oblique head coming here, being highlighted, and then a transverse head coming across your metacarpals. So the origin of the flexor hallucis brevis is going to be the cuboid in the lateral cuneiform. It is going to insert into the proximal phalanx of the first digit, and here within these tendons you have some bones called the sesamoid bones. It is going to be innervated by the medial plantar nerve. It is the only muscle in this layer innervated by the medial plantar nerve. It helps us on the medial aspect of the foot. And its primary action is going to be to flex the big toe. The next is your adductor hallucis. Again, we mentioned that it has an oblique head and a transverse head. The oblique head is going to originate from the base of metatarsals 2 through 4, and it's going to insert onto the big toe, whereas the transverse head is going to originate from the plantar metacarpal phalangeal ligaments, or metatarsal ligaments, sorry. And it, again, it says in the name, adductor hallucis, its primary action is to adduct the big toe. Last, we have our flexor digiti minimi brevis. This is going to originate from the 5th metatarsal, going down into the proximal phalanx of the 5th digit, and its main action is going to be, as it says, to flex the small toe. Right? So that's through layer 3, and now we have one more layer to go. Looking at the 4th layer of muscles, here we have our interosseous layer. So, interosseous, and then we're also going to have the tendons of tibialis posterior and fibularis longus that are coming through this layer. You'll see those in the lab, but the musculature here is of the interossei. So we're going to start with the dorsal interossei. The dorsal interossei are going to originate from the adjacent metatarsals, so in between metatarsals, and they're going to insert onto the proximal phalanx of digits 2 through 4. So digits 2, 3, and 4. Their action is to abduct away from midline. If you remember back, just like in the hand, dorsal interossei, we had the DAP and PAD mnemonics. Dorsal, abduct. DAP. Plantar are going to adduct. PAD. Okay, so now looking at the plantar interossei, they're going to originate from the medial sides of digits 3 through 5 and insert onto the proximal phalanges. And these are, again, adducting towards midline. So towards midline, bringing those muscles in. And then here we're saying that this is midline, and we're going to abduct, moving away from midline if we're looking at the dorsal interossei. Both of these, or all these muscles, are innervated by the lateral plantar nerves. Alright, so now talking about some innervation of the foot, just kind of zooming out a little bit. We talked about the musculature. Now let's see how do the nerves get to where they're going. Let's start down here on the plantar surface of the foot. We have our posterior tibial nerve coming down, and our posterior tibial nerve, or a tibial nerve, as it's coming down, is going to come down and give off a medial plantar branch and a lateral plantar branch. The medial plantar branch is doing 3 muscles in the foot, or you could say 3 and a quarter. The medial plantar nerve in the superficial layer, remember, was doing the abductor hallucis, and then it was also doing the flexor digitorum brevis. It will then later on go on to do the flexor hallucis brevis, as well as the first lumbrical. The lateral plantar nerve is doing all of the musculature in the plantar surface of the foot that wasn't named there. We also have a couple of other nerves that are going to give innervation to the skin around the heel. And then on the anterior surface, here is our superficial fibular nerve. This is coming through the lateral compartment with our fibularis tertis and fibularis brevis. We're just going to come to the surface of the foot, and you're going to see that that does cutaneous innervation, no muscular innervation in this dorsum of the foot. But here we have our deep peroneal nerve, also known as deep fibular nerve, coming through the anterior compartment of the leg, passing underneath the retinaculum, and it'll be running with the tibialis anterior artery, which is going to turn into the dorsalis pedis when it hits the dorsum of the foot. And here you can see it's supplying the 2 muscles of the dorsum of the foot with nerve supply. So that's going to be your extensor digitorum brevis and your extensor hallucis brevis. So that is your muscular innervation to the foot. Now, I do like to break out muscular innervation and cutaneous innervation because it can get a little bit confusing. We're going to start with the cutaneous innervation to the dorsum of the foot. In the last image, remember we saw the superficial fibular nerve as it's coming out of the lateral compartment, kind of runs down over top of the foot, and it's going to supply this region with the cutaneous innervation. Important to note, the skin between the first and second digits, right in this region, is actually supplied by the deep fibular nerve. Because the deep fibular nerve was running down, it was deep, 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 and then as it gets into the dorsum of the foot, it hits those two muscles, and then it continues down and dives between the two toes, innervating the skin in that region. Everything else is done by the superficial fibular nerve. Over here on the medial aspect, kind of on the medial malleolus running up the leg, this is your saphenous nerve. And remember, this is a branch of your femoral nerve that was coming through the adductor canal. So there goes your saphenous nerve there. And then over here, dorsolateral cutaneous nerve. This is going to be a branch of your sural nerve. So I really just think about this as being surrounded by the sural nerve because I don't think the course goes into this much detail. Now looking at the base of the foot, or your plantar surface, here once again you see the medial plantar nerve and lateral plantar nerve. Now I do want to point out this image has it splitting down the third digit. In your course pack, we're going to know that the medial plantar nerve is supplying the medial 3.5 digits. So we're actually going to move this line over to one toe. So we're going to ignore this image and we're going to say digits 1, 2, 3.5 are all supplied by the medial plantar nerve, and it's just the 1.5 on the lateral aspect. Per the course pack. Okay, so that's the only difference here in this image versus what your course pack is giving you. Now, on the medial aspect, over here on the palmar surface, again, we have a little bit of the saphenous nerve, a branch of the femoral nerve, and then over here laterally, we have the sural nerve as it's coming down to innervate the side of the foot. Now, as you are well aware at this point, there is a difference between the nervous innervation, when we're talking about the specific nerves to their regions, and the dermatomes. The dermatomes of the foot are really what you need to know when you're looking at the toes. We're going to start with the L4 and then go to S1. L4 is going to be the medial side of the big toe. So we're going to split the big toe in half. So the medial side of the big toe is going to be L4, and L5 is going to be the lateral side of the big toe, and then digits 2, 3, and 4, whereas the little toe is going to be S1. So dermatomal innervation, one more time. Splitting the big toe in half, over here on the medial aspect is L4, then everything up until your little toe is going to be L5, and little toe is S1. So that's the cutaneous innervation to the foot. Next, we want to talk about the arteries of the foot. The arteries of the foot are a little bit tricky for students, so we're going to follow these in two directions. We're going to follow an artery from the posterior aspect and then an artery from the anterior aspect and see how they come together. So we're looking from the posterior leg. Right here we have our posterior tibial artery. Remember, this is one of the branches of your popliteal artery. It's coming down, and it passes behind which malleolus? Remember, it's really important to know that this passes behind the medial malleolus with all of the tendons from the posterior compartment of the leg. Comes down, and it's going to give off a medial and lateral plantar artery. So here you go, you see the medial plantar artery coming down towards the big toe, lateral plantar artery comes around, and the lateral plantar artery is going to contribute to the deep plantar arch, okay, or the deep plantar artery. So here you go, the lateral plantar artery continues and it contributes to this arch, which will then also articulate, or it'll go up and join a branch of your dorsalis pedis. So that is coming from the back. You have your posterior tibial coming down, medial plantar artery, lateral plantar artery, the arch, and then contributing with a dorsalis pedis. Coming from the front, you have your anterior tibial artery coming down, 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 down. It's going to continue anteriorly as the dorsalis pedis artery in the dorsum of the foot, and then it's going to dive between the first two toes to join the deep plantar arch. Here we go. We're going to see it on this image as well. Anterior tibial artery going down, 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 down. Comes down as the dorsalis pedis artery. And then it's going to dive between the first two toes to form that arch. Okay, so that takes us through the arteries of the foot. And the last thing we're going to cover are the veins. So when we're referencing the veins of the foot, there's really just two that we need to keep in mind. There is a dorsal arch here, dorsal venous arch, that is on top of the toe, or sorry, on top of the feet. And this is being supplied by, or draining into, the great saphenous vein on the medial aspect of the leg, and the small saphenous vein on the lateral aspect of the leg. So, dorsal venous arch can come up on the medial side as a great saphenous vein. Again, that's going to go right up until we get to the saphenous opening in our femoral triangle. Or if we're draining on the lateral aspect, we're going to come down and we're going to come up behind the posterior aspect of the leg. Then we're going to dive into our popliteal fossa to drain into our popliteal vein, which again, if you remember the structure is superficial to deep in our popliteal fossa, that is going to be the middle structure, because we have nerve most superficial, then we have vein, and then we have artery in our popliteal fossa. So this is the venous drainage of the foot. And with that, that brings us to an end of this video.